We really go there in this episode with patriarchal sex in context with clinical, sexual, and pelvic healthcare with a deeply attuned and experienced physiotherapist who's also a mother of sons and who, like myself, really wants the freedom of living beyond patriarchal sex for the benefit of both men and women. Lisa Fitzpatrick is an embodied woman, an experienced medical health practitioner, and a spiritual woman who is in her process of really looking at patriarchal sex in the context of her work, which often means that she's seeing women coming to her with physical pelvic pain, much of the time in association with the invisible paradigm of patriarchal sex happening in their relationships across many ages, although Lisa has a focus on working with menopausal women. I really recommend men as well as women listen in on this one because while the value for women might be more obvious, the benefit for men in understanding women's lived experience in more depth is possibly going to be really relevant to your relationship and sexual intimacy. And since caring to understand each other's somatic and emotional experiences is such a major key to being able to live free from the patriarchal sex paradigm, which blocks true intimacy and mutual respect and expanded states of pleasure, if things sound good to you, then this episode will be helpful. It's a really practical and body-orientated conversation, and it's one that can help name the invisible experiences women typically tend to have. And I really like that it invites couples to explore how they can work together rather than against each other or reacting to each other. And I know that Lisa and I would both like to hear your thoughts and feelings after listening to this. So please do feel free to share. And I personally, the researcher in me, has been very inspired from this conversation with Lisa, so that I move to a place of making very clear and practical definitions of patriarchal sex that can support a medical, clinical application of this context applied to their work. Lisa works in the Bangalore and Lismore areas in Australia. She's just written a book called Sexy Menopause, where she shares so much wisdom from her 35 years of experience as a physiotherapist. So follow her links to get her book. She is such a wise woman. And I'm looking forward to seeing her soon at the Tigress Experience, the free event for women that's happening on the 30th of March in northern New South Wales. So if you're a woman that's able to come, make sure to book your ticket now, and you will see both Lisa and I there. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. Well, I am very pleased to be bringing to you all here Lisa Fitzpatrick, who is someone I personally know, as well as she is a female pelvic and sexual health educator and physiotherapist, who you've been doing your work for a really long time. Please tell us how many years, Lisa?
Yeah, 34 years. Yeah. Mm.
Incredible.
I think it's really, I guess, where the field is so exciting for me personally, having been in this area of women's health and well-being for a long time, is this idea that we are extracting from many different wisdom traditions to bring unique bodies of knowledge through the more experienced we get, the more we understand the nuances of the female condition. And so for me personally, bringing my yoga teacher training work, my spirituality, my spiritual beliefs into this work has been an essential thread that's held a lot of the different processes that I love so dearly to offer my patients together. So maybe I could say there's some pioneering there in the sense that that's stepping a little bit outside the mainstream. Yeah, thank you for asking that though.
Yeah, because I get that it's relatively new in healthcare, um,
Yeah,
have such a specific focus, and you've been part of
yes.
developing it, shall we say. And you mentioned conditions, and I want to, get to the topic of this podcast and weave that in, but I think a good way to get there might be to ask you, what are the general types of conditions that women come to you with? What kind of things do you see going on in the culture via your patients?
Yeah, look, I think in relation to this discussion about being in a place where our world is very confused, I guess, about sexual boundaries, sexual parameters, behavior between genders, I see relevant to that discussion a lot of patients who are experiencing sexual distress because of their preconditioning around what sex represents symbolically to them and psychically to them. So I think where pelvic health is so interesting is that never lies. You know, the body's always keeping score of the pelvic stories, the beliefs, the spiritual and cultural and social impact of those beliefs really shows up in the physiology of the pelvis. So I guess I'm hearing from my patients this distress because a lot of patients experience pelvic pain, pain with intercourse, inability to climax, inability to feel libido, arousal, aliveness. That's a really big part of what I see that causes bucket loads of tears, lots of tissues, a lot of holding space. And then curiously, when I do the internal exams, we will see how much impact that's had on pelvic floor muscle, pelvic floor physiology, how the bladder, bowel, and reproductive organs actually operate because of the deep domino effect that the psyche has on the physiology of the body. And I guess one of the reasons why this felt so important to me is because there's been some very distinct research that's come out about how much the imprints of trauma impact physiology in ways that we can't even conceive. So, for example, if we're religiously conditioned to feel guilty about pleasure, we will absolutely see that showing up in the physiology of the pelvic floor. There's an unequivocal link there. If we're watching some violent Netflix series prior to then having, intimacy with our loved one, the pelvic floor physiology will absolutely be in a heightened state of stress, and there is more likely to be sexual tension and pain and discomfort. There's so many resonating impacts of what our society is exposing us to, and why perhaps pelvic pain and this condition, dyspareunia, is an old-fashioned word for painful sex, which we now call female penetrative pain disorder, why that is on the rise, and we're seeing it in so many different age groups. I guess I have a very special interest, being 53 myself, in menopausal sex and how that changes, and I guess the changes are really distressing when they're coupled with the aging process as well. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, there's something. so honest and true about the level of our bodies that will just give us, yeah, really instant, immediate feedback a lot of the time. And in the ways that I work with women, where that's in contrast to where their mind is at and what they think, can be a very confronting contrast sometimes. That you obviously deal with seeing women that are experiencing physical symptoms of some kind, probably. And when you described that, I think you said disorder, that there's a something that comes up in me of just taking a pause and not fully accepting some of these terminologies because I wonder how much the way that she's being approached is even being looked at before she's being pathologized in her response.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that out loud. It can't be emphasized enough that this quick attitude towards pathologizing the female experience towards a situation or a context where you are having a very healthy response. If your nervous system does not feel safe and it is telling you to guard your pelvic floor, there is a reason why it's telling you that. So you're so right that we can't afford to pathologize a lot of these things before we understand contextually what's actually happening. And unfortunately, I think what tends to happen a lot with this idea of the patriarchal feedback for that cycle of I'll call it a pain cycle that someone might be operating or entrenched in, is that the male response to the female physiology will often also increase and impact and exacerbate some of the symptomatology that we'll also see. So I take a lot of time to bring the partners or husbands into the sessions in order to, because of, it's a delicate thing to, I guess, navigate this idea that when something is happening to the female physiology where she is not feeling safe and a male partner is taking that personally and is unable to remove the egoic reaction to taking it personally, there isn't much chance of us removing the veils of that are coming between two people with their intimacy and their expression of that, safety. So a lot of men, I find, in this current cultural climate are really supported when things are brought down to physical mechanics. Now, I know that sounds really simple, but when we look at things and we break things down to the nuts and bolts of the physical body, and we look at this idea that the physical body is going to be in response and there's nothing emotional, personal about that, we are
Mm.
breaking the down to a patriarchal machine, and we have to be very, very careful about that. But we also have to tread this delicate line of understanding how to language things so that it's not creating a pathologization in our males as well as our females. But unfortunately, because of how Western medicine's structured and how it's been born out of the patriarch, it is heavily weighted towards protecting the male egoic, circumstances of power over the situation and control over the situation. So I think in this case, with this idea that the female conditions being pathologized, I believe there's a much deeper agenda at play behind that.
Mm.
And I think my belief about that's probably quite universally could be contemplated quite widely, I guess, and accepted, but it's controversial in the sense that our female reproductive system is capable of producing life as we know it, there's an immense power in the female pelvis, and there's an immense potentiality there that actually has the potential to also bring out the deepest fear in our men of not being omnipotent. And so the way that we language things, I think in particular, will either bring those men into this discussion about how do we fix this. This is an epidemic. This is a real concern. Women's bodies are being traumatized more and not less, that we
Yes.
know about this domino effect of what it means for a woman's physiology to be guarded. We see it more and more, not less and less, the more we learn about what is happening. And that really concerns me a lot. So I'm so happy that we're having this discussion. We have to go well beyond the surface level, but unfortunately, in the male psyche, the surface level and the mechanics make the most sense because that's their access point.
Yes. And
Yeah.
in a
Does that
way,
make
when I
sense?
totally, and when I hear that, Lisa, part of me is like, well, that's okay and that's fair enough because I actually feel inspired to, go beyond maybe my own usual definitions of what patriarchal sex is, defined in a more psycho-emotional, psychosexual, spiritual
Mm,
level, and look
mm,
at it, well, what does it tend to be on a very mechanical, practical
mm,
level, like
mm.
actually properly describing that? Because you
Yes,
mentioned a woman's physiology being guarded. So this
yes,
of bracing and of
yes,
holding tension rather than
yes,
relaxation is like
yes,
the result that's the issue that a lot of women would probably come to you with, too much pelvic tension and yeah, yeah.
yes, yes, absolutely. And holding that as a reaction to the various insults and traumatic experiences, and also her absolute over functioning in a society that doesn't let her rest in her feminine nearly enough, and yet she's still held up as the blame for those for being too busy, for not being in her feminine, for not being in the reclined space. So what's a girl to do? What's a girl to do when she has literally been placed in a society that's pretty much enforcing productivity and economy over intimacy? And I believe that's where this polarity is, where, the economy of doing the straight line dance towards orgasm and having an outcome focused, outcome driven result with sex, which is very much a dominance, power, and control
Mhm.
linear brain space to be in with sex, over this idea that intimacy is very circular. It's very much a spiral, but it's also very much the capacity for us to step outside the boundaries of certainty and control. And because certainty and control is almost it's like an addiction for a lot of people on the planet right now, certainty and control. We don't have, I think, enough faith that actually the benevolent power that's running through the life force organism that we are, the benevolent power that wants to produce ecstatic, joyous, sensual experience, that's available to everyone equally,
Yes.
really, if we could only address the shame and the trauma that we're possibly shielding and creating as a barrier to understanding that. And what a gift to be able to give that to people through these discussions and through this work, that we're just a few deep aha moments away from both men and women experiencing pure divinity. I mean, fancy that. How good would the world be if we all had this capacity to experience the pure divinity coursing through our life force, being. It's a travesty that the repression's happening the way it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and what you just beautifully described is our most natural state. And, to be actually physiologically experiencing grace, pleasure, connection, union in our bodies are very physical, tangible experiences of that. But in order to especially have a shared experience of that, there can't be a leading with the control and the certainty. There has to be a leading with vulnerability and a curiosity or a reverence to the unknown. There's got to be that spaciousness. And one of the biggest things that I hear for so many years with my work with women as well, their lack of spaciousness is probably the underlying most predominant complaint. Not enough space to feel herself, to experience herself, to unravel her tension, to do all of these things. So it's so unfortunate that most of the time when women are having sex, they're actually accumulating more tension, more bracing, and not less.
Absolutely, especially when we introduce this idea of performance and performative visual expression that's very much perpetuated by the rise in the use of pornography and visual cueing and objectivities. And I think what I feel a lot of patients are experiencing due to this mismatch between being in their presence with intimacy and having, I guess, an emphasis on how things might appear or look in relation to normal. So a lot of my patients will actually lead with, am I normal? Is this normal? I don't know if I'm normal. And I think that's a really, it's come about almost due to this information overload, where the mind is very good at actually absorbing all the information. But as far as filtering and discerning what actually works for us as an individual and being really confident in the sense that our instincts and our intuition, which are a mysterious thing, are very capable of giving us the signaling around what is our yes boundary and what is our no boundary. But because of the information overload, and you're right, the lack of spaciousness, that small, quiet voice, which I truly believe lives in this parasympathetic pelvic cauldron response, that when we reside there, we can hear that very clearly. But if we're not living there and we're constantly in the distraction of these information, sound bites that get thrown at us and these visual pressures to perform, which is again productivity, economy, and the masculine capitalist, mainframe, we as women are losing a very, very valuable part of that Sophianic essence that brings us to life and brings us joyousness and brings us nourishment and substance in sex, as much as any other part of our self-expression. I think divinity's desire to know itself through us will always prevail. So that's a message of hope I really wanted to sort of put out there, that once that little key, in the door is, so all I have to do is show up and understand that my shame's not going to kill me. I can sit here in the literal shit of my experience and I don't have to turn away. I can actually sit and I can love myself because divinity loves me that much that I'm not having to run anymore from myself, which is, I think, a cause of a lot of this distraction. Then we have this opportunity that every single human can access that divine coding without it without it being there's no inequality. We all have equal rights. We don't have restrictions and controls over us with that. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to remember. Yes, the world's in trouble right now. There's some terrible things happening. But the one thing we have agency over is access to divinity, intuition, the things that actually message to us what will be healing in nature. And I think that depends on us having space, silence, contemplation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm just so struck at how, in this moment, not all physiotherapists are the same. Lisa, the amount of personal inner work, growth, expansion that you've taken yourself through as a woman, and you're then able to bring that, through your traditional training, clinical skills to women is so incredible. Like your clients are so lucky to come across you and to have your
Oh, oh,
guidance.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm lucky to have the beautiful women that I see and learn so much from. And I'm always very humbled by that. I think what I feel the most, and thank you so much. I'm taking that with so much humility right now because what I think women struggle with so much is this idea that they are alone or in some degree of shame about what they're experiencing, and yet the resilience that women have to navigate some of the most personal tragedies that we can possibly carry in this part of our bodies it's phenomenal to me, and I every day feel blessed that I get to witness the power of women in that way that we prevail, because we do, I feel, have a particularly there's something incredibly profound about our connection to God and to divinity that I think has been really, it's time for it to be brought more into the discussion around how our spiritual essence is actually able to step into patriarchal darkness that's actually creating a lot of spiritual warfare right now, that it is actually the female physiological leverage that will create and support solutions for these issues that we're experiencing as a human, as humankind right now. So I might sound really political there, but I do believe in that after witnessing the power of what and the messaging of what comes through women, particularly women in the Marga stages of life and beyond. Yeah. Yeah.
I have to go more into that with you, but just before we do, I've got to say that, you and I sitting here sharing together are on the podcast called Beyond Patriarchal Sex, where you and I are ready for that conversation. But
Yeah.
I know that for us as women and definitely as practitioners, a lot of women are not even aware of calling it patriarchal sex. And so when something is going on, like the tension in their body and, you know, um, symptoms that could have them labeled with these dysfunctions and things that you directly deal with, women blame themselves most of the time.
Yes.
That's what I
Yeah.
have found. And I wonder if that's what you have found as well. They're not sitting there saying, well, he's only giving me patriarchal sex. They don't even can, to even see the paradigm is a massive process in itself. But the first place that women often go is shouldering more responsibility than they're really meant to be holding. Because, yeah, I mean, it's so typical that women will go to, this must be my fault. How can I make it better? How can I be better? How can I make myself better? And so it's very innocent, I'm sure, that a lot of women are coming to you with symptoms of what I might call a patriarchal sex relationship.
Yes, 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 absolutely, absolutely. It's heartbreaking how many women turn on themselves and are, I guess, in a also in a framework or context that turns it on them as well. That's the scary thing, isn't it? That it's perpetuated that way because there's so much to lose for unconscious privilege to be removed. There's so much to lose, yeah, especially in a, I guess, in a way that power and control and dominance is when it's being pushed towards this fear response over the primal feminine power, the retaliation and the violence that comes from that fear
Mm.
is really, really, well, it's killing women everywhere, isn't it? Women are the casualty of that fear and anxiety response towards the primal feminine power. So, how do we solve this? It's not up to women to solve it for sure. However, because of our capacity to be a vessel for the feminine, divine, I guess, messaging and the intuitive answers and solutions, unfortunately, some of the mental, emotional, and spiritual load is going to fall on females, but maybe we've been building the resilience muscle for an awfully long time for this paradigm shift to happen. Maybe we are prepared to be those warriors that, I guess, needed to go through a lot of pain and suffering in order to build the vessel of capacity. Um, it's not going to ever be something for the faint-hearted, I guess, to navigate solutions to what's happening, is there? It's we don't want to have nerves of steel, because we also need to know that our vulnerability and our softness is actually the greatest strength that we can have in this. Yeah, and then our presence, our capacity to sit with our own intimacy is actually the solution. Um, I don't have all the answers. I'm still questioning it all myself, and I'm seeing these men come into the sessions crying their eyes out, and they're hurting, and they don't know what they're supposed to be. They don't know whether they're meant to be protectors and providers, or they don't even know what it means to be supportive sometimes. Um,
And
yeah.
in those instances, their tears are not from physical pain. I'm just wanting to make clear
Yes.
that.
Yes. 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 You're right. It's anguish at the possibility that they might be having to face their own shame. I think shame is really I guess the antidote to the shame is the pride, and the pride is an egoic protective measure that's causing varying degrees of very dark and harmful behaviors from our men. And it's, I guess, a projection of the shadow onto a lot of their partners as well, right? That because we are receptacles, and we are very often, many of us, including many men, are empathic creatures. We're able to absorb quite a lot before we realize that it's not actually ours to absorb, right? We're sort of, which is the paradox around us actually softening into our receptive, because it does require a lot of discernment, I think, about what we bring into our field. But the problem with us being too discerning sometimes means that we'll look away from things that we really should be addressing and looking at. I like that this conversation you're having is not, you're not steering away from the troublemaking that's happening. with patriarchal sex being an issue, it would be
Yes.
easy to make this a fluffy conversation, right? But yeah, when we're being discerning, we have to let some of that truth in, and we have to realize that this is actually happening. Women are being coercively controlled. The system's failing both men and women. The Western structures are definitely not healthy, and there's more
Yes.
suffering than there needs to be, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, and the what I'll call in this moment the invisible to most patriarchal influence that's permeated throughout society. The medical model is certainly not exempt from that. It's all through it, is what you're telling us. And
Yeah.
so when these women come and they have these symptoms and they are, you know, by default blaming themselves and trying to figure out what's wrong with them, because that's often the terminology that women will say, that I hear at least. And you're talking about the men in there as well. And I want to really highlight this because yes, men have been given the upper hand in that system. But just like I say all throughout this podcast, it's a paradigm that both men and women are upholding and contributing to in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
what I find with women, even if they're suffering, even if they're in pain and physical pain in the case of your patients,
Mm-hmm.
it's like there's also a lack of honesty in us a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time as women.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so understandable, it's
Mm.
absolutely unconscious, because when
Yes.
in her own inner world, in her mind, her first point of call is to blame herself because the whole context of the culture has no place to center the rightness or the health or what her well-being would look like. It's all just you're
Mm-hmm.
failing to be this ultra receptacle that's meant to tolerate and transmute fucking everything, even if it's not in
Correct.
line with your not just pleasure, but your sanity, your well-being, your health. And you're failing to do that is kind of the message that she might be getting. But still,
Mm-hmm.
she's not seeing the context of how
Mm-hmm.
that's all playing out and how all permeated
Mm-hmm.
it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so, often it can feel like a risk for a woman to start to unpack the patriarchal sex paradigm for herself
Mm-hmm.
because maybe her survival of her and her kids are caught up with her maintaining the patterns and dynamics exactly as they are, you know, and
Absolutely.
if it's too upsetting for the man and he does get reactive in, the most unfortunate way would be a violent way. Uh,
Yes.
that's really scary. I mean, that's a reason in itself not to bring it up. And I'm just kind of
Mm.
being a voice for that unspoken wisdom,
Mm.
women's
Mm.
physiology for a moment, where I
Mm.
imagine that without even realizing it, they're probably coming to you hoping for a way to make sense of what's going on and that someone will center their experience and highlight like what's really right for you, what's really right for your body, what's really right for your female pelvic health. Are you considering yourself in all of this? If you've been enjoying the contemplations from listening to the episodes of this podcast and you're ready to take things to the next step, to actually be living beyond patriarchal sex in your life, in your relationship, whether that's one you're in now or one you'd like to be in future. If you are a woman, if you're a man, if you're a couple, do feel free to reach out. There's a no obligation connection call that I welcome you to. And also, if you're a woman that wants to integrate the embodied knowledge that leads to more women being able to live beyond patriarchal sex and more, also the connection call is to inquire about training as well. So I look forward to hearing from you.
That's absolutely a major breakthrough realization when I guess someone comes in and realizes that they've prioritized something that might have also been niggling at them for 20, 30 years sometimes, and it's been all about raising children or looking after everybody but themselves, and finally to come into this moment where they're actually being witnessed, they're not being judged, and they're being held in a space of presence. And you're right, centered for what their experience is for a change, rather than being invalidated or dismissed or silenced or gaslit or whatever the medical system does. It's a really quite it's a privileged moment. For me, again, that's what humbles me so much about this work, is that I can't think of anything else more important for the people that come in than to be witnessed and validated and supported for these parts of their deeper, I guess, suffering. Yeah, I guess also from a collective point of view, this idea that the patriarch is in a state of transition. I think, women deep down understand that we have an opportunity, I guess, to start to have the kinds of conversations that you're having. So you're right, where it's not cognizant in a lot of women, they might have come along to have an appointment for the nuts and bolts and the physical symptoms of what's going on for them. But the deeper parts of them that are showing up for that experience of being here and actually having these discussions, but also being present with their own bodies and their own feelings and their own experiences, I believe that a lot of women are subconsciously drawn to that because it's part of what we're all being called to do, right? We're all being called to sit with these elements that maybe some of us have been running from them for a long time. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And if I'm to say more from this unspoken physiological voice in women's bodies, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I can't do this alone. I need companionship. I need
Yes.
guidance. I need
Yeah.
a context for my experience outside of my own mind.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. I think we can't also afford to be measuring up our own experiences against our own past selves experience as well. So stepping outside your own experience allows that opportunity to reflect on, you're right, other women sharing becomes a portal, I guess, for awakening that also relies so heavily on trust and vulnerability to be present. And not everyone's comfortable with that level of sharing, I guess, around health conditions, and personal intimacy issues are not necessarily a dinner table discussion. But I always get so much pleasure when I hear that my patients have connected with each other or connected with their friends and had the capacity to actually discover that actually, no, you're not alone. 3 other friends in my group of 5 have got these same concerns that are going on for them, and we've never spoken about it, but now we can speak about it because we've been and seen our pelvic physio this morning, or we've seen our practitioners that are bringing light to that and allowed
Yeah.
us to have these conversations more openly. So I've seen a really big proliferation of that willingness to embrace it over coffee chats, and even in the older generations of women where that kind of thing might never have been spoken about.
Yeah.
There's this beautiful opening up. And I think the other thing that's really lovely too is I do see more men coming in and engaging and wanting to be part of their partner's experience of this work in particular. Yeah, and some women will take a little while to feel comfortable to bring their partners in, but I think that more and more see it as the only way they can get through this is if they're in alliance with their partner, male or female.
Yes, yes, yes. And, in these examples that I've been talking about, I'm obviously speaking of women that are, you know, living their life without the, what I would call like spiritual sexual initiation at the embodied level, that they haven't come to that yet. I mean, you're playing a big part in women being able to find that. But yes, so an example I have as well, a physical one of a client that I've worked with before. She was some point through a course with me, and she started feeling a level of aliveness that was so physical inside her yoni, inside her pelvic floor and further in, like towards her cervix. She was so it was so alien to her to have tangible, visceral, pleasurable sensation that she told me after that she took herself to the doctor to make sure everything was okay. And it's
Wow.
just wild, right? That a woman actually experiencing pleasure in her physical body is a
Wow.
false or alarm that something might be wrong.
Wow. Wow. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. I have had similar examples in the clinic of women having very normal pelvic health symptoms that they have already in their minds run away with pathologizing because they are awakening symptoms. It might be excessive discharge or lubrication or changes in the way that they climax, but a lot of those experiences are so far out of the realm of the box of normal or beige that things are put in that that it's cause for concern. It's curious, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And it's just so guaranteed that there are going to be so many issues to the point of relationship breakdown, families breaking apart when a woman's experience isn't centered, because not only are our bodies more complex, and that's why, so much of the medical health testing is all standardized on men and not women's bodies because women are more complex, right? Um,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but what I was going to say is like that together with all of the changes that we go through on a fertility level, on a psychological level as women. And I know that you work with
Mm-hmm.
this through the stages of life cycle for a woman.
Yes.
There's just so much constant changing. And even just within 1 month, of all the phases
Yes.
of the cycle, for that to just be constantly invisible, constantly
Yeah.
ignored,
Mm,
just
mm,
no reference point for the importance of attuning to that or the
mm,
validity of factoring that in. It's just
mm,
guaranteed that couples are going to run into all kinds of
mm,
issues. And, good
mm.
luck if you even get to keep the relationship together. And if you do, it's probably because she's enduring things that she shouldn't be, you know?
Correct. Yes. Yep. Yep. It's so true. It's thankfully more of a there is a pendulum swinging, and we can see, I guess, a lot of awareness coming in about menopause and menstrual considerations in workplaces, which we would not have seen 10 years, even 10 years ago, I guess. There are positive changes, but we still have such a long way to go because in response to those changes, there's this kickback from the group of unconsciously privileged cohorts of people that basically do have to face the inconvenience of no longer having entitlement. Entitlement is being when it's being taken away from someone. Boy, does it push a lot of buttons and triggers a lot of a lot of unhealed trauma for people, I guess, male and female, right? Yeah. That's what we're having to overcome, isn't it? Is this reaction to things being in change and flux, but also status quos being broken open, which often causes quite a crisis initially before the adjustment's made. But that crisis is so necessary. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and at the interpersonal level, I know that most people are a pretty long way from factoring in just all the nuance and detail of the female experience and seeing how does that become relevant in an intimate sexual relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a long road, it's a long path ahead of us for everyone. But I guess I want to say just how much in favor that really is, not just for the woman. Is how does a man get to become truly confident with a woman and a woman's body if he doesn't really know what he's doing and she doesn't really know what's going on inside of her? How can that possibly be successful?
Yes.
So this inquiry into unearthing what patriarchal sex even is, uh,
Yes.
I 1,000% believe this is absolutely in the favor of everyone. And
Yes. Me too.
yes, yes, Lisa. And because you have such a wealth of, physiological knowledge and wisdom about the body and the female body, female pelvis, I would love to ask you the question I often ask at the start, but now we're
Yeah.
at the end, which is what actually is patriarchal sex according to you?
I believe patriarchal sex is I'm going to say it in a nutshell. I believe it's a fear response to the power of the feminine capacity to create life. And so, in that respect, you could say that it's a reactionary response to reality, nature, truth. And in being a reactionary response, we're not necessarily going to look at it as being a pro vitality, healing, positive, affirmative, restorative outcome because it's in reaction to. So patriarchal sex being in reaction to the capacity of the female body to reproduce is basically in an over reaction to the loss of power, and therefore in that reaction the use of power and control over that capacity to create life is basically built into the fabric of patriarchal sex. So what's the opposite of this? The opposite of reactivity is creativity. So when there's a really a deep reverence to the creative life force, I believe it's the Holy Spirit or the Sophianic capacity for a human to reach their full potential. That creative life force is that creative willingness that we have to show up with uncertainty so that we can really experience the mystery. That's really going beyond patriarchal sex. That's where we all want to be, right? We all want to be in divine, ecstatic union, but we also always want to have our vision vertically with that. So I think patriarchal sex is a very horizontal vision. We're looking at comparing, we're looking at performing, we're looking at how it all maybe sounds and looks in the fabric of the material world. But if we have that vertical focus and we're sort of constantly looking at the attributes of the divinity that's wanting to express itself through us, then going beyond patriarchal sex is the only way we can really do that in relationship with another human being. So we can do that solo, and a lot of women are choosing that, right?
Yeah.
Why are so many women choosing to be single? Because we can have a much better relationship with divinity single sometimes than we can when someone's distracting us over here. But if we have a male partner who's actually receptive to this, um, then, and yeah, then we are both moving towards our divine purpose for being. And there is nothing more distressing for women right now, in my opinion, and in my own personal experience, of being derailed from our life purpose by somebody who's stuck in that paradigm of the material being the most important
Mm.
present factor and priority. And when we're liberated from that and we become, I guess, a contained empath or a liberated empath, I guess you could call it, where we're no longer entangled, I believe that happens more readily for women when we stop cycling, because we're no longer being bound to the cyclic nature of the procreative imperatives. So, sex becomes about procreation. But when we go into sexy menopause, as my new book's called, we understand that sexual energy is now, and that cyclic energy is now being freed up to procreate with the vertical awareness of what divinity is wanting us to actually be in this world. We all have our own unique life purpose, but our partner, particularly if we are in heterosexual connection, but I'll also say diverse sexual connection can also definitely apply to this. We need our partner to be supporting alignment with our life purpose. And unfortunately, a lot of patriarchal relationships are doing the opposite of that, and women are suffering because of that too. And women are being killed for that as well.
Totally. And so to acknowledge that another individual and in this conversation that a woman has a purpose outside of being a wife, being a mother, her career, that her purpose is transcendent of worldly roles. That's not part of the patriarchal psychology to perceive as anything other than a resource to consume and, you know, build that horizontal world life with, and
Yes,
so that perception of someone as a sovereign being and that you're a sovereign being, that's a
yes,
totally different level of relationship and therefore intimacy, right?
yes, yes, yes. Absolutely. That's stepping into very unknown territory for a lot of people. It's not knowable, I guess, for again the mainframe. There's a stickiness in the mainframe that will possibly, maybe we have centuries before that stickiness is going to unravel. But
Yeah.
where I see it being mostly reinforced, I think, is this idea that we're not seeing the general conflict being spiritual in its origin. So the spiritual warfare is happening. We're labeling it psychology. We're labeling it mental pathologies and medical pathologies. We're looking at it in a material fashion in a patriarchal capitalist world, I guess. But it's actually a spiritual battle. It's a warfare that's occurring that people are unwittingly engaging in because it's not even being languaged in that way. It's too fraught to language it that way too, because religious wars are a thing, right? It's like, but I believe it's at the core of what's really going on, for people right now in a lot of the pathologies. There's a real hijacking of people's destiny, dharmic, um, karmic, uh, destiny. And I think for people who have that really strongly, especially women right now, they get targeted. They get they get really targeted by those naysayers, and the force against that work gets a lot stronger as someone gets closer to the truth of those matters as well. Yeah.
I love that you voiced that. I know that quite a lot of the women listening will be nodding their heads, feeling you, agreeing with you on that one. Yeah,
Oh, sad but true, right?
yeah. And please tell us, Lisa, about your book.
Oh, yes. So I'm writing my final edits for Sexy Menopause as we speak. I'm really, really, um, I'm really happy with the messaging of the book that I guess is giving us back that agency and that sovereignty in our postmenopausal journey and our perimenopausal journey around reclaiming the change that is a very positive change that has actually unfortunately been framed as a negative decline, when actually when we really look at it from this point of view again of moving beyond the current narratives that are keeping people very unhappy and very stuck and very desperate for answers. I think that if we're really able to again see how much spiritual power comes through a woman once she stops being hijacked by the cycling, I guess, that can sometimes come with being in a world that doesn't honor the menstrual cycle and has such an emphasis on procreativity and fertility, the capacity for fertility, that liberation of the female soul or spirit beyond menopause is a really, really exciting time for women. And I'm just hoping my book plants that seed for more women to realize that you actually come into your creative prime. So sexual energy transmutes to creative energy. And it doesn't mean we have to be having lots of sex to have a sexy menopause. It's mostly about us actually being able to show up with such full presence and such authenticity that we no longer actually look to the left and the right of us into this, horizontal perspective to find out what we're meant to be doing next and who we're meant to be. We're very much answerable to the vertical axis only, and I think that's a fantastic thing that we can all look forward to. And I hope the book supports with more women to understand that and to understand the physical changes that are happening at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. And maybe the last thing I'll ask for now, because it ties in exactly to what you just said, these physiological changes. And thank you so much for standing for everything you just spoke. It's not something women get to hear enough. It's such a small voice in the collective. So I'm so happy your book is coming.
Thank you.
Really, really. You mentioned more at the start, Lisa, around how, and I'm interpreting now, but the patriarchal sex paradigm
Mm.
has a lot to do with recognizing the power, the primordial power that is in a woman's pelvis, on a physiological level. Like there's some connection I thought you were drawing there around when that's made more conscious, what can happen as a result. And I made that link about the patriarchal paradigm. Yeah.
Patriarchal paradigm. The I guess what I see as an outcome of being able to step beyond that paradigm is a greater level of it might sound so mundane, but I think the answer is always a simple one, isn't it? That we crave peace. We to have peace in the pelvis, to have peace in our lives, to have peace in our nervous systems, and that liberation for both men and women to experience peace in their connection. So we're no longer buying into those chaotic and very disturbing frequencies, I think, that are also misattuning our entire nervous system. Whether
Yeah.
those frequencies are coming from, external demonic influence, or however you want to label that, or whether they're purely coming from us being so immersed in pollution and overstimulation. Maybe it's a little bit of both. But we, as beings, we're looking at being in the Garden of Peace, the Garden of Eden, the place where, there's balance and where restoration's actually possible. So rather than this ecstatic liberation, I guess, that I mentioned and referenced before, yes, there's a degree of freedom and spaciousness and ecstasy that comes from being taken out of the gold-gilded cage, I guess, that we've all been stuck in. But primarily, it's about us also going beyond the fluctuations and into a place where the stillness and the peace is, it gives us a medium where we can hear the voice of the divine more clearly. So ultimately, that voice, I think, as I mentioned before, it's accessible to all of us, but the conditions that we create as a collective really are moving away from us being able to hear that rather than towards it. And your discussions about this going beyond patriarchal sex, I believe, are really important for us, in order to realize how important that is for us to hear the small, still voice that's actually guiding us into union with each other and reducing this idea that there is separation between us. And that also goes beyond gender, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, is the truthful answer is often simple. And
Mm,
so if we're bringing it down to physiological peace,
mm,
lack of tension and complexity and difficult narratives and all of those things in the pelvis on a physiological level, I wonder if that's a great note to leave this at for our listeners to really contemplate, um, and a way for men and women to look at the conversation together if they're in a heterosexual relationship, right? Because who can disagree with that? Everyone should have, a sense of peacefulness inside their own body. And if something's going on that's leading to pain, that's leading to chaos, does that deserve some questioning?
mm,
And
mm.
I know men often complain about women being very wayward and forceful and blaming with their emotions and things, but and yes, it's true. And I'm often doing sessions with women about how to meet that and how to communicate in a more effective way for sure. But
Yes.
why is the disturbance in her?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And does it increase after sex?
Mm, mm,
Because
mm,
while a man typically will experience physical release and say
mm,
de-stressing, a woman is
mm,
often left in a mess, in more stress, in more
mm, mm,
complication.
mm,
And
mm.
just the simplicity of that is definitely something to be talking about amongst each other.
Bring it. Peace to the pelvis worldwide.
Oh, no.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for bringing your book into the world.
Thank you for this opportunity. I've enjoyed every minute thoroughly.
Amazing. And, we'll put your links here so women can find you. But let's just say while we're here on the audio, where are you? Where do you deliver your pelvic health sessions?
So yes, I have a clinic in Bangalore and a clinic in Ballina. And I have a website, www.sexymenopause.com. And I also have a lisafitzpatrick.com.au website also for anyone that wants to get in touch personally. I do Zoom calls, and I'm very happy to see people in person as well.
Yeah, incredible. And so obviously the location is in northern New South Wales in
Northern New
Australia.
South Wales, Australia. Yes, I'm so sorry. We've got a few international listeners, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, quite a lot, I think. And but yes, you also work online. So I'm so happy to introduce you to people that don't know you already. And thank you so much for bringing your wisdom. And I can't wait to see you soon when I'm in the area.
I absolutely can't wait to see you in person. And thank you so, so much for bringing this really, really powerful work into the world. It's been an absolute honor to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Having listened to this episode, if there's something in here that you want to keep exploring, a great way to do that is to share it with a friend. I've noticed that a lot of people don't feel so comfortable to engage publicly on social media about these episodes when they're posted. And so maybe sending the episodes privately to friends might feel easier for some people. And please know that whenever you save an episode or comment on the podcast and subscribe to the podcast, that is also enormously helpful in helping to spread the word about this inquiry into patriarchal sex. And so, whatever way you wish to engage, you are so welcome. There's also the Patriarchal Sex Survey. The link to that you will find in the show notes. And if you would just like to reach out and share your particular concerns or personal situations with me, and you can reach out on social media or on email. And I look forward to sharing the next episode with you.